We begin our bulletin by one story that has gripped the entire world in shock. Violence, tear gas, bullets and fire in the US Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. Rioters overwhelmed the Capitol Police and stormed the Congress building, as we can see from the visuals on your screen right now. The pro-Trump supporters were trying to interrupt the certification of Joe Biden's Electoral College win. But the interruption threw the US Capitol into a deadly spiral of chaos and violence. Lawmakers, staff and reporters were forced to seek shelter, and several House office buildings were evacuated due to potential bomb threats. Vice President Mike Pence was also pulled from the Senate chamber, but the situation quickly spun out of control, as you can clearly see from the shocking visuals on your screen. Protesters even breached the Capitol, entering the Senate chamber and streaming through statutory halls. In fact, in a shocking video, one man sat in the very seat that Pence had been sitting in just a few minutes before, while another was in Speaker Nancy Pelosi's office. Lawmakers, reporters and staffers sheltered throughout the building as pro-Trump rioters banged on doors and shouted slogans. In fact, at one point, gunfire was heard inside the Capitol as the Capitol Police officers barricaded the doors to the House chamber, and the police later confirmed that one person was shot and killed. Although the specific circumstances of that shooting have yet to be released, tear gas was deployed and an improvised explosive device was found on the Capitol grounds as well. And then by mid-afternoon, the National Guard was finally called up to help suppress the unrest. Nearly 2 hours after the first reports of a breach. What unfolded at the Capitol Hill was the culmination of months of Donald Trump's tweets and a speech right before the violence erupted. Listen to this.
All of us here today do not want to see our election victory stolen by emboldened radical left Democrats, which is what they're doing, and stolen by the fake news media. That's what they've done and what they're doing. We will never give up. We will never concede. It doesn't happen. You don't concede when there's theft involved. Our country has had enough. We will not take it anymore, and that's what this is all about.
World leaders, the NATO chief and his own team members reacted to the brazen display of anarchy on American soil. Members of the US Congress also called on Trump to stop these rioters. After much chaos and violence, Trump said this. Listen in.
This was a fraudulent election, but we can't play into the hands of these people. We have to have peace. So go home. We love you. You're very special. You've seen what happens. You see the way others are treated that are so bad and so evil. I know how you feel. But go home and go home in peace.
Meanwhile, President-elect Joe Biden described the chaos as an unprecedented assault of American undertakings. He also said that the authorities struggled to take control of a chaotic situation at the Capitol, which led to the evacuation of lawmakers.
Let me be very clear. The scenes of chaos at the Capitol do not reflect a true America, do not represent who we are. What we're seeing are a small number of extremists dedicated to lawlessness. This is not dissent. It's disorder. It's chaos. It borders on sedition. And it must end now.
We are also getting reports that Twitter has blocked Donald Trump's account for 12 hours now. For more on the chaos and violence underway in the US, we have Jagriti Dave joining us live from Washington, D.C. Jagriti, welcome to WION. We know the House has reconvened to certify Joe Biden's victory as of now, but before we get into that, these are some shocking and tragic reports coming in from the US. Many are saying that Trump's presidency is ending with carnage. Tell us more about exactly what transpired at Capitol Hill, and was this all premeditated?
Well, this is extraordinary scenes that we've been seeing all afternoon here in Washington, D.C., utterly unprecedented. And what many people and many of his critics are saying has been incited by the president, who has been encouraging his supporters to come into Washington, D.C. and question the result of the election, which and follow his claims that there's been election fraud, which there is no evidence for. And we saw protesters storm into the Capitol, reports saying that local police, Washington, D.C. law enforcement saying that they used chemical irritants on Capitol Police to get into the building. And lots of questions being asked about how they managed to get into such a heavily guarded building. But really, this is hugely unprecedented. Mike Pence, the Vice President, Nancy Pelosi, all evacuated, many lawmakers sheltering in place. And what we're seeing is a curfew in place overnight until the morning, as police are trying to restore law and order back to the city.
Right. Now, Jagrati, we're also getting reports of the death of a woman who was shot at in what is an absolute mockery of law and order. In fact, we just heard Donald Trump say that he loves his supporters and he understands how they feel, almost justifying the violence that took place. Tell us more about this.
Well, Donald Trump posted a video. He was silent throughout most of the early parts of the day as the riots were happening, as the Capitol was being stormed, as protesters entered into the Speaker's office. And President Trump put a video on Twitter sort of telling his supporters to go home, but repeating his baseless claims of election fraud. And this is something that I think a lot of the president's supporters are now actually speaking out as well. Those who've remained silent so far are speaking out, clearly shocked by what's happened. So you had a former director of communications, Alyssa Farah, who was tweeting to Trump supporters saying that this election was not stolen, this has to stop, this is not what America is about. We're also hearing Stephanie Grisham, former White House staffer, who was the First Lady's chief of staff. She has also resigned effective immediately from her position. So I think a lot of people are really stunned by what's happened and stunned by the president's, comparative silence on this, with calls from people like Joe Biden for him to make a national television address to people for calling for calm, which he has failed to do.
Right. Now, former U.S. President Barack Obama has also issued a strong statement saying that the violence was incited by a sitting president who has continued to baselessly lie about the outcome of a lawful election. So has the Trump administration taken any ownership for the events?
Well, as you say, lots of, Barack Obama is saying that, it's hardly surprising from his perspective that this has happened. But he said that this is a disgrace. This day has been a disgrace in the history books. And I think there are a lot of people who are really shocked by what's happened, and they wanted the president to perhaps come out more forcefully and say something to supporters directly, instead of which he was actually at the protest speaking to his supporters, encouraging them to continue to challenge the results. In the House, in the chamber of Congress, where the joint session is resuming, there were strong words from Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, who condemned what happened. He didn't go as far as to directly blame the president for inciting the behavior of the protesters, but he was incredibly strong in his criticism of them and of what happened and the damage to America's reputation. But by continuing on with their session to ratify the election results, Mitch McConnell was sending the signal that he believes that American democracy can recover from this.
Right. Now, as you just mentioned, Jagrati, Stephanie Grisham, the former White House Communications Director and Press Secretary and current Chief of Staff for the First Lady Melania Trump, has resigned. Now, in the wake of the violent protests, will we see more high-profile resignations from President Trump's core team?
Well, I think there's behind the scenes a lot of people who have been dissatisfied and who have been sort of reportedly trying to edge their way out, but they found it difficult to do so. It remains to be seen whether there will be people who follow in the footsteps of Stephanie Grisham. Her team hasn't, and the First Lady's office hasn't commented on her reasons for leaving. But, you know, there are, as I say, people who are supporters of President Trump. Tom Cotton, for example, the senator, widely seen as a contender, presidential contender, has been speaking out, saying that this is un-American, and I think lots of Republicans are speaking out, issuing the same sentiment.
Right. Now, the Attorney General for the District of Columbia has, in fact, called on Vice President Mike Pence to organize the cabinet to invoke the 25th Amendment to remove President Trump from office. Trump has under 2 weeks left in office now, but will he be removed somewhat unceremoniously before that?
Yeah, I mean, it looks very much like, Vice President Mike Pence, National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien are, making moves to distance themselves from the president. There's reports that say from ABC News that Vice President Mike Pence hasn't spoken to the president in the last few hours. So there seems to be some kind of a distancing going on. It remains to be seen if the 25th is invoked, if that does happen. In the 2 weeks remaining before Joe Biden takes the presidency.
Right. All right, Jagrati. We'd request you to stay with us because, as we know, the Joint House has reconvened to certify President-elect Joe Biden's victory. So we would like you to weigh in on that as well. Now,